It started with a number that didn't make sense. Not a big number, not millions, not billions, just a few cents, appearing where they shouldn't. At first, no one noticed, because banks aren't built to care about pennies, but somewhere in a quiet bedroom lit only by the glow of a cheap laptop. A teenager did. His name wasn't important, at least not yet. He wasn't a prodigy in the way movies like to portray. No genius montages, no dramatic music swelling as code flies across the screen. He was just curious, the kind of curiosity that doesn't let things go. He had been messing around with online banking systems the way most teenagers scroll through social media, testing, clicking, observing, not trying to steal anything, not at first, just trying to understand how things worked. Because the truth is, most of the systems we trust every day are built on layers we never see, and sometimes those layers don't quite align. He noticed it while transferring a small amount between two accounts. A delay, a rounding difference, a fraction of a cent that didn't reconcile. It disappeared, or at least that's what the system said. But money doesn't just disappear. It moves, it settles, it's accounted for, always. So he tried it again and again. Each time the same thing happened, a tiny inconsistency, too small for anyone to flag, too insignificant to trigger alarms, but consistent enough to form a pattern. That's when curiosity turned into something else, because patterns mean opportunity. Banks process millions, sometimes billions, of transactions every day. They rely on automation, on trust in the system, on the assumption that small discrepancies are just noise. But what if that noise could be controlled? What if it wasn't random? He started testing the edges, different amounts, different timing, different paths between accounts, slowly, methodically, like someone mapping out a maze. And eventually, he found it. A flaw buried deep within the system's rounding logic. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't obvious. It was the kind of mistake that only appears when thousands of tiny processes interact at once. A fraction of a cent, redirected. Not to nowhere, to somewhere, to him. Now, a fraction of a cent doesn't sound like much because it isn't. But here's the thing about scale. If you can influence a system that processes millions of transactions, even the smallest advantage becomes exponential. So he built a simple script. Nothing complex, nothing flashy, just something that could repeat what he had been doing manually, over and over again, quietly, and then he let it run. At first, nothing changed. Then, a few dollars, then tens, then hundreds, all from fractions of a cent that no one was tracking, no alerts, no flags, no one watching, because in a system that large, it looked like nothing, and that was the most dangerous part, because the system wasn't designed to detect someone like him. It was designed to detect thieves who take too much, too fast, not someone who takes almost nothing, perfectly. Days turned into weeks. The money kept accumulating, and with every passing day, the question changed. It wasn't, does this work? It was, how long until someone notices? Because someone always does. Eventually. Banks aren't just systems, they're ecosystems, auditors, analysts, algorithms, all constantly searching for irregularities. But here's the problem. They don't look for what they don't expect, and no one expected this, not from a teenager, not from fractions of a cent. But patterns have a way of surfacing, even when they're small. An analyst somewhere noticed a discrepancy, not a big one, just something that didn't quite add up across thousands of transactions. It wasn't enough to trigger panic, but it was enough to ask a question, and questions lead to investigations. At first they thought it was a system bug, then a reporting error, then maybe an internal issue, because the idea that someone outside had found and exploited such a precise flaw felt unlikely until it didn't. They traced the transactions, backwards, through layers of data, through systems designed to obscure, not reveal. And slowly, a picture began to form, not of a sophisticated criminal network, not of an insider, but of something far more unsettling, a single point, a single user, a single teenager, quietly pulling value out of a billion-dollar system. By the time they understood what was happening, it had already been happening for weeks, maybe longer. And the amount? It wasn't billions, but it didn't need to be, because the real damage wasn't the money. It was the realization that a system trusted by millions could be manipulated by someone with enough patience to look closer. They shut it down immediately, patched the flaw, reversed what they could, and then they went looking for him. But here's where the story shifts, because this isn't just about what he did. It's about why. When they finally reached him, there was no dramatic chase, no raid in the middle of the night, just a conversation, because he hadn't hidden, not really. And when they asked him why, he didn't say money. He said, I wanted to see if I could. That's what unsettled them the most. Not greed, curiosity. The same curiosity that drives innovation. The same curiosity that builds systems like the one he broke, but also the kind that tests boundaries, because every system has them, and someone, somewhere, is always looking. In the end, the outcome wasn't what you'd expect. There were consequences, of course. There always are. But there was also something else. Recognition, not public, not celebrated, but acknowledged. Because what he found wasn't just a vulnerability. It was a blind spot. And blind spots are dangerous. Not just for banks, but for everything we rely on. Technology isn't perfect. It never has been. It's built by people, maintained by people, trusted by people, and people overlook things, small things, insignificant things, until they aren't. Today, the system is stronger, more checks, more safeguards, more awareness, but the story lingers because it forces a question we don't like to ask. Not, can this happen again, but how many things like this are happening right now that we just haven't noticed yet? Somewhere, someone is always watching the edges, testing the limits, looking for patterns that don't make sense, and sometimes they find them. Not because they're trying to break the world, but because they're trying to understand it, and sometimes that's enough.